to Making the Brand, the podcast where marketing and pop culture collide. I'm your host, Brianne Fleming. I can't wait to chat about brands, boy bands, and everything in between. Because brands who have a pulse on pop culture can create adoring fans of their own. All right, I keep striking gold on Twitter because today we've got another interview thanks to Twitter with Dustin Stout, who my friend Jeanette tagged in one of my tweets. So if you're listening, thank you, Jeanette. And Dustin, thank you so much for joining me and being so open to chatting with a stranger you just met on Twitter.
Anybody who is a Backstreet Boys fan is definitely not a stranger to me and 100% someone I want to hang out with. So.
I knew we'd get along great, and I think that's why Jeanette must have tagged you, because she knew we'd get along perfectly. So, love it. Well, admittedly, I don't know too much about you other than the few things I've gathered from your profile and the fact that you love the late 90s, early 2000s wrestling era, which we'll get to. But can you just start off by telling me more about your background?
Yeah, so I started as a blogger. Back in 2009, I sat in a room with Michael Hyatt, and he was teaching everyone about how this world of social media and blogging can help you build a platform for yourself. At the time, I was a youth director trying to figure out how to reach more teenagers, and this happened to be peak Facebook. So I learned how to use Facebook and Twitter to grow my audience, who were teenagers at the time. And I also started blogging as a means of sort of teach. They say that you retain more of what you teach than what you hear. So I decided to teach what I was learning and therefore, help keep it in my head. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing about social media and the things I was discovering. Long story short, people started reading that little blog. People started wanting to hire me to do their social media or to consult them on social media strategy. I ended up starting my own agency, freelancing, turned into full-time working from home for myself, started being asked to speak at conferences, won some awards, blah, 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 started a few companies.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a crazy story of this was just interesting to me and it came naturally and people hired me to do it and it's allowed me to do a lot of other fun things too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, if I could think back of what I wish I knew in 2009, and if I had started blogging then and really saw the potential of personal branding, over 10 years ago, I can only imagine how many doors could have, should have, and would have opened for me. But it's great to hear that it worked out for you. And I think
we'll flip that perspective and say, now that I know, the next 10 years is going to be full of those doors opening.
Yeah, hopefully that's the plan. I'm so glad it worked out for you and it brought us together. So I do want to backtrack a little bit and talk about the tweet that initially connected us. I was tweeting about repetition and how our favorite songs, including I Want It That Way, probably, they repeat the chorus over and over and it never gets old for us. And I was saying that marketers need to give themselves permission to be repetitive because repeating yourself and having that consistency is what will get your customers to know you so well. So you chimed in and we're talking about how wrestlers do this and have been doing it for decades. So can you talk more about, before we get to the wrestling stuff, I want to talk more about consistency in your own life. First of all, with the fact that you always wear a red V-neck like you are right now. And then we'll get into the wrestling fun stuff.
Yeah. So, branding to me, I started as a graphic designer. That was my profession before I became a consultant. And so as a designer, I understood this idea of branding and building a visual brand. And I remember reading something from, it was some magazine I read, and it was about some of the most top performing CEOs that have ever lived, from Steve Jobs to Mark Zuckerberg, and even some female CEOs. Usually this mentality is like a male. Usually you associate males with wearing the same thing every day, but I read about these strong female CEOs who are also taking on this mentality of they just wear the same thing every day because it's one less thing to think about. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, it sort of becomes part of their brand. And for me, I love the color red. It's always been a part of my brand. And I was working for a t-shirt design company. I was a graphic designer for them, and I loved this particular brand of V-neck T-shirt. So I was like, man, I'm just gonna buy like a dozen red V-necks. I'm just gonna wear that every single day, and that sort of became my brand. And it's so funny. Like, it's not only the ability to be instantly recognized by your audience. I mean, you think about Homer Simpson or Mickey Mouse or, you know, any of your favorite characters growing up. They always wore the same thing. So it's recognizability. But also, I'll tell you this fun story. I was my wife and I were driving. She was dropping me off at the grocery store to walk into the ATM because I need to pull some cash out. So she drops me off. She drives around the park. Come outside. I'm walking straight towards her. You know, like thinking she's going to stop. I'm going to get in. We're going to go to the beach. I think we were going to the beach that day. I'm walking straight towards her. She looks at me, turns, and keeps going. And I'm like, what the heck? So I have to like chase her down. I'm like, did you not see me? I was looking right at you. She goes, oh no, you're not wearing the red shirt. I didn't recognize you. So this branding effect also has like a reverse Superman effect. Whereas like if you want to disappear, just don't wear the thing you always wear.
Yeah.
Superman taking off his glasses.
Yeah.
Disappear in a crowd. So I believe heavily in wearing the same thing every day for branding, for less brain having to think of things, and also for the ability to disappear if you ever need to.
Yeah, I mean, if you can disappear from your own wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever at the time, I mean, that's how you know the force is strong. If even the people who love you most don't recognize you anymore, that's too funny. So we've seen consistency in similar ways with some of our favorite wrestlers growing up, like The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, from their wardrobe to their catchphrases and everything. But let's go back in time a little bit. Can you paint a picture of what your early memories are of this era in wrestling?
Yeah, I started my journey in being a pro wrestling fan in the era of Bret the Hitman Hart. That's where I started, when he was like number one. He was the world champ, and my favorite wrestler of all time, Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, was sort of up and coming and making a way for himself. And you know, like I something in me fell in love with this idea of like being a brand, like the word brand wasn't in my vocabulary, but like this idea of being a character that people recognize, and like you always have the same theme music and entrance music and you know, the same kind of costume, so to speak. So it started very early in that aspect. And you know, I was around when Stone Cold first came in, and he was a part of the $1 Million Man's entourage before he was Stone Cold Steve Austin. I was there when Rocky Maivia hit the scene before The Rock was even a brand. So I got to see a lot of the evolutions of these characters. And of course, you know, like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man and the Ultimate Warrior, like I saw clips and stuff of those, but you know, they weren't quite my era. But to see, you know, the evolution of some of these newer characters who were speaking to me was it was gripping. I fell so in love with this idea of creating a character and becoming that character and creating a fandom around that character. A really awesome thing. And being a comic book nerd too, I mean, superheroes were obviously a big source of inspiration, and superheroes are the best branded products in the world, in my opinion. So yeah, it started feeding into me early, this idea of brand and building a, you know, character.
Yeah, and pardon the Backstreet reference, but their personas and their characters were larger than life. There was merchandise and video games and all these different ways where they took their brands outside of the ring. So do you have any, gosh, as a young fan, like, did you immerse yourself in all of that merch and, you know, go out?
Oh yeah, I had the T-shirts, I had the action figures, I had the toy wrestling rings, and the posters. I had, you know, all kinds of memorabilia, and I just, you know, I was in it. I loved it. And unfortunately, I've never gotten to see a live wrestling event. It's on my bucket list. I haven't done that. I have managed to be to 4 or 5 Backstreet Boys concerts though. But
That's what matters.
yeah, that's what really matters. And then got into high school, got into sports, and just didn't have time. I was in sports, but I was also in theatrical productions and show choir. So I was like doing a lot of things that kind of lost touch with the wrestling world just because I didn't have time to keep up, and DVR wasn't really a thing back then. So I kind of lost touch with it, but always, sort of kept tabs on, those superstars who impacted my life. And, of course, it's been easy with Dwayne Johnson becoming the multifaceted superstar that he is, crossing out of that realm of wrestling into the world of acting, and now hosting one of my favorite TV shows, the Titan Games. Oh my gosh, so much fun.
Yeah, he really built himself into a brand. I remember Bill Gates tapped him for the Xbox launch back in the day, and he was just getting involved in all these different brand partnerships and everything. So let's transition and talk about The Rock, and really just, gosh, there were so many aspects of him from a marketing standpoint that he got right. I mean, let's just talk about his name first, naming himself The Rock. What are, aside from his name, and what are some other elements that he really built upon to really make himself memorable?
I think, having seen him come out as, again, Rocky Maivia, which was a very common sort of, didn't have, the only thing he really had to bank on was his history, his family history of being professional wrestlers. And so, like, there was just not a whole lot of things to sort of, I guess, ground him as a superstar. It was, he seemed like another great wrestler. And then I think it was, during when wrestling started to switch into this attitude phase, or gosh, I forget, they actually called it like the era of attitude, or the attitude era. Yeah. When D-Generation X was a big thing, and the Nation of Domination, and it became about attitude, and then Stone Cold Steve Austin really came into his full swing. I think that's when The Rock, he joined, if I remember the timeline correctly, he joined the Nation of Domination, and all of a sudden he went from this, sort of bright, plucky, everyday guy wrestler, to now he's like this darker character. And it kind of worked for him. It brought that, sort of lackluster element, or kind of polished him up and made him more interesting. It gave him more depth as a character. Yeah. And so I think that's what started to shape this real, like, attitude driven. He saw that he could really play that character to its strength, and he had that. He just had that ability to give that attitude out. And so I think he really discovered that. He saturated himself in that sort of a niche, if you will, that niche type of character. Yeah. And he found ways to really make it his own. He's a wizard on the microphone, first of all. And yeah. If you look back in his early years, you can see him trying different things. He's tried a bunch of catchphrases, but it wasn't until, if you smell what The Rock is cooking, that people just took hold of it. Yeah. Right. And this is, I think, what's really important about anybody who's building a personal brand, right? Because, we could build products and brands all day long, but as a personal brand, we have so many influences. And I feel like as we grow, especially when we're younger in our career, we pick and we take things and elements from different people, and we say, oh, like, that's what I want to be. Like, 10 years ago when I started blogging, everybody wanted to be Seth Godin. Right. And they were like, oh, if I could just be writing like Seth Godin, so that they'll take little aspects of him and apply it to them and try to use it. May or may not work for them. Nowadays, everybody wants to be Gary Vee, right? They want to be this furious, no holds barred, say what you want, kind of offensive, doesn't care. Right. So like that, you cherry pick these things from different people, from these different influences. And you try to make it your own, and you experiment with a lot of things. And in that, you end up finding, what really works for you and what doesn't work for you. For a long time, I tried to be Seth Godin, but I'm just not that quippy. I'm very long-winded. You read any one of my blog posts, they're minimum 2,000 words. Seth Godin can write 5.5 words, and their minds are blown. I can't do that. So I had to figure out, what really worked for me and what my audience responded to. So my blog, another example, not just my writing style, but my writing topics. At the beginning, I was writing about not just social media marketing, but I was also writing about creativity and design, but also I was writing about Christianity because I was a youth pastor at the time. It just made sense for me to talk about that kind of thing. Yeah. What I realized was I was really dividing my audience and testing my audiences. And when I wrote about the social media content, it took off like fire. I wrote about the Christianity content, didn't really come out, might have gotten some debates, some arguments going, which was not really what I was interested in. So people weren't hiring me to go consult them on their Christianity. They were hiring me to consult them on social media. So I figured out what worked for me, what tone of voice worked for me, what subject matter worked for me. And I sort of just dove into it, sort of like The Rock. He found that one catchphrase and he dove into it, and then he explored out, and little by little he found these other things, and it built this attitude. You go back and look at some of his early things. He's just not quite as polished. He's not quite as electrifying. But he worked on it over time and built it, and it became more of almost like a muscle. Like branding, I think, is very much like a muscle. The more you flex it, the more you exercise it, the stronger that brand becomes, and the more things you find out work and don't work, the stronger, more specific it becomes.
What a perfect pun for wrestlers always out there flexing their muscles and their their branding muscles too. Because he also had, he had the people's eyebrow, right?
People's eyebrow.
People's elbow too, I think.
People's elbow, yeah.
All those moves, and it wasn't just him. I know Ric Flair, going way back, he had the figure 4, and I only know that because when I would play the video game, I was like, I don't know, 8 years old, and I would always press the buttons just to get into the figure 4.
Yeah,
that was
just get that figure 4.
All I knew.
Yeah. Bret Hart was also a figure 4 kind of guy, and Shawn Michaels had the sweet chin music. That was his. And he would go, oh my gosh, nothing would excite me more than you see Shawn Michaels. He goes back into the corner, and he goes, and then you instantly know it's gonna happen. And then, for The Rock, this is a podcast. People can't see what I'm actually doing. I
could clip this and you can make a little promo.
Dustin just ran into the back of his corner and stomped his foot.
Yes.
But The Rock too. He gets over in that corner. He gets in that football pose. You're like, it's gonna go down. You get so excited to see these things you've seen a million times. And the last time I experienced this was probably not even a year ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at some wrestling event, I happened to flip it on, and The Undertaker was back, and I can't believe this guy's still wrestling.
I know.
But he's still doing. He goes through the same exact move. It's like he has to hit every one of these bullet points every time he goes on. He's got to do the big walk on the top of the rope and come down with a big arm slam, and then he's got to do the big boot to the face, and then the big leg drop, and then he's got to do the choke slam, and then finally has to put him away with the tombstone powder. It's electrifying. And I think we as marketers, as branding people, as brands ourselves, like, we need to find those special moves that we do that our audience can connect to and that electrifies our audience, because it's so emotionally powerful. Especially for me. And same's true with boy bands. Like, you hear the first few bars of your favorite song, you're like, you are.
Yes.
That's all it takes.
Speaks to my soul. Yes, I am instantly electrified. And when you use that word, I mean, as far as wrestlers go, the first one that comes to my mind is Hulk Hogan.
Oh, yeah.
Hulkamania. And
yes.
I think he was maybe one of the first to use color so strategically. Red. I know you love red.
The first one to use it so over the top. Like, wrestlers before that, they used color, but it wasn't like flashy brand. When Hulk came out with that bright yellow, and we could talk color psychology all day long. The color yellow will actually induce dopamine in your brain, making you feel happy when you see it. So, like, he used that color. He also used red. Great choice.
Yes.
But yeah, he utilized it so well, and it was such a flashy color that you couldn't not see it.
Yeah.
And another little fun story about Hulk Hogan. I actually got to meet the Hulkster.
Oh.
And this, talk about a guy that knows his brand. right? So this was just a small meeting of people. Hulk was going to do his very first ever Google Hangouts on air. This was before live streaming really took off.
Yeah.
Google had this Google Hangouts on air thing that was, kind of cool and interesting. And I happened to be one of the people that was known for knowing how to use it because I was doing broadcasts all the time on it. Hulk needed to do a live broadcast, didn't know how. So we had to do like a small training with him. He hired a company that I was consulting with at the time. Long story short, I'm in this hangout like,
starstruck.
Yeah. Is he going to be here? And sure enough, he walks in, and the guy that like his partner for this old hosting company that he was a partner on, he's just sitting there, and all of a sudden, all you see come into the frame, guy sitting here, is this big old arm come around and put him in a chokehold. And, he gives him like a little wrestling thing, and he goes, "What's up, brothers?" And
oh my gosh.
Totally in character. The whole there was 5 of us there.
Yeah.
But he held his brand down. He kept it. He did not disappoint in terms of brand. He just always had it turned on. So,
yeah. Never misses an opportunity to
branded for life.
Yeah. Always electrifying, even via Google Hangouts, I guess you could say. So would you say that Hulk was one of kind of the pioneers to really use branding so strategically as far as wrestlers go?
I think he's the one that really brought it mainstream. I don't want to take away from any of the great wrestlers of the past. I mean, you got Andre Giant, who was iconic. There was a lot of iconic wrestlers, but it wasn't until, Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon dreamed up this storyline of a character named Hulk Hogan and somehow hit the right notes. They hit the right emotional tones, the right story arcs, and it, in my opinion, Hulk Hogan just made wrestling, pro wrestling, put it on the map and made it larger than life. To again quote one of our favorite songs.
Well, what also was super interesting is these wrestlers who you would love, like sometimes they would jump ship and go, I don't know too much about it, but I know there was like the WCW and the NWO, and all of a sudden someone you loved became a villain, and I'd be watching my brother and he'd be like, "No, we don't like him anymore." Like their association would always change too. What do you think is the strategy behind, I think it was the WWF at the time, not anymore, but by them making these individual groups, what do you think the logic was there?
I can't say for certain. I know a lot of it is, story. Wrestling is all about story. And, there's some fighting in between, but really the fighting is driven by the storylines and the character arcs. And so I think when a character starts to get a little stale and maybe, the storyline isn't as fun anymore, they have to do something different. They have to keep that storyline going. And I think the writers behind, professional wrestling have some of the hardest jobs because of all the continuity that needs to happen. Good night. Like if I sit and think about that, I start to sweat. But yeah, I mean, I think it's more or less like they have to figure out how to keep these characters evolving while still also maintaining a bit of the integrity of their brand that they've built. One of the most famous ones, I wasn't a huge WCW fan, but I did kind of keep tabs on it, was Sting. This guy who kind of looked like he kind of looked like the Ultimate Warrior at first. That was like multicolored paint, but all of a sudden he transitioned. Something happened in his character arc, and he all of a sudden like looked like the Crow, like the white and black only, dark trench coat. Like his brand shifted entirely, and I think it was just more or less like sign of the times. Like people were more interested in darker characters. So I think that's really what drives a lot of that. And thank goodness, because if it weren't for that darker attitude age, we may not have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson like we have him today. He may not have come into his own. So I think it's really good, for wrestlers. And again, going back to the, trying different things, branching out just a little bit and seeing what fits a little bit better is good for any brand.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the storyline, because from the outside looking in, you forget that there's these people behind the scenes that are writing it as if it's a soap opera, and these are the characters. Really so I kind of just thought, let's hire this guy and here you go, run out here, do your entrance, and then come back, but
there's another parallel that I've often drawn from the world of wrestling, and how you mentioned like these different groups within wrestling. So, I feel like at times they'll take two superstars who are maybe, great on their own, but they combine them and all of a sudden they have this greater reach, this greater effect. As a blogger, if I want to extend my audience or reach a new audience, one of the things I have to do is team up with another blogger, right? I have to go guest post on their blog, or I don't have my own podcast, but if I want to reach an audience of people who listen to podcasts, I just go on somebody else's podcast. And it's that combined, that combined, what's the word I'm looking for? Electricity, that combined talent or passion, connecting those two skill sets. I think something in that, lends to a much bigger reach for both people. Because now after I'm on this podcast, I'm going to go tell my audience, I'm going to email my subscribers to go listen to it. That extends your reach, it extends mine, and everybody's all the better for it. So I think that aspect of when they bring these groups together, sometimes it's to have that exponential growth effect, but also there are times when maybe a character's not doing too well, like Rocky Maivia wasn't doing too well. He joined the Nation of Domination. All of a sudden he had a much larger fan base because of his association with that group, and he eventually went on his own and did much better.
Yeah. I love that you addressed that, because I think a lot of times people think that collaborating with like-minded people, it's great, but sometimes some people feel threatened by it. Like, I can't lift up this other person. I want to be better than that person, And I was listening to Reese Witherspoon talk about this, because there's a ton of actresses just like her. They're all competing for roles, and she always says success isn't limited. Like, there is enough success for all of us to go around, and we're all better for it when we join forces and work together.
100%. And that's something that we, a lot of people know me from back in, the 2011, 12, 13 era when Google Plus was still a thing. I became the Google Plus guy because I was like, oh, new shiny social network. I'm going to be all on it. That's actually where I built most of my platform, despite the fact that everybody said it was an utter failure. I built many companies and had lots of clients because of that one platform. But, we all, all of us influencers who were on that platform in the beginning, we had this mentality of we could only lift each other up. We're not competitors. Even though some of us ran agencies, some of us did consulting, there was potential for conflict there. We always lifted each other up. And it didn't hurt us. It only helped us. So I think to limit your idea of, there's only so many clients to go around, or there's only so many podcast listeners to go around. Not true. Like, you literally could not handle all of the potential that is out there. So always just freely share and share alike and lift each other up. There's no room for trying to bring each other down.
And it's super timely right now, because today I saw ESPN tweeted that today is 10 years since LeBron's decision to come to Miami and take his talents to South Beach. And it's kind of
has it been that long? Jeez.
10 years. I know. I mean, I'm from South Florida, so I remember that day quite well. It was like Christmas morning.
I am from Western Pennsylvania, but I'm basically a Clevelander because my stepdad and his whole side of the family lived in Cleveland, and we rooted for the Tribe, and we rooted for the Cavs and the Browns. And
sorry.
that was our lot in life. But
but you got your ship. He did come back.
Yes, he came back. The truth be told, though, I was always a Bulls fan. So I was
gotcha.
I was the black sheep of the family.
Yeah. Was it because they're red?
No, it's actually, that's one reason probably, but also because I was a big Michael Jordan fan. I was actually born on his birthday, February 17th. So I always felt like I gotta like Michael. He's the best, and we have the same birthday. So
yeah, exactly. You're connected at the heart.
Yes.
But it's kind of the similar idea. LeBron could have easily said, I don't want to compete on Dwayne Wade's team and
right.
I want to be the star of the show. And Dwayne Wade, it says a lot about him because he kind of gave up some of his spotlight. I think he even took a pay cut, if you really read into it, and to get him and Bosch. So And they were
Yeah, they
all,
had
like
a
we
bigger
said,
game in mind. It was bigger
mhm.
than themselves, and they knew that together there's enough spotlight to go around. And in the long run, I don't think it hurt Dwayne Wade at all.
Yeah, yeah. It only helped. It only helped.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how this all translates to corporate culture, because if you think about it, these wrestlers are employees of this larger organization, and they each build their individual brands, and it ends up benefiting this bigger organization. So
Yep.
is there any advice you would give to both corporations and employees as far as becoming stronger together by having your employees, freely build their personal brands, and how that can all work together?
Yeah, I mean, each organization is different. I've consulted companies from resorts to mom and pop restaurants to big banks to the largest distributors of heavy machinery. We'll just say
Mhm.
that much in the world. All kinds. I don't think there's an industry that I haven't touched on. Not true. Have not touched on the adult industry. Refuse to. Maybe a few others as well that are kind of morally questionable.
Yeah.
Um, in every instance, like, there's subtle nuances. For example, like, a restaurant with a heavy churn, or, restaurants tend to have heavy turnover when it comes to servers and staff. Like, I wouldn't consult a local restaurant, and say you should encourage your servers to have their own personal brand,
Mhm.
because it just wouldn't make sense. They're there for 6 months, and then but I think there are plenty of business models, plenty of industries and enterprises in particular that would greatly benefit from having employee advocacy as an emphasis.
Mhm.
The culture that you cultivate with your employees is, in our today's world, can be extremely attractive and a differentiator for bringing consumers to your products and services. So a company that's known for having the most happy employees in the world is going to be more attractive to than a company that, say, is known for abusing their employees. Amazon. Um, so yeah, I think it totally, again, depends on the industry, but I think any industry that is doesn't have a high turnover rate, that does value their employees and does understand that your employees can be your greatest marketing and advertising tools, should 100% have employee advocacy programs and do training about how to build a brand, how to build their own platform, and not be afraid of them maybe going off on their own someday. If they do, great. But in the meantime, have them build their brand online, have them build a social account that's social, name. I had a word for it. It was like I lost the train of thought. But have them build their Buffer Dustin account. Like, even if it's a separate account. If your
Mhm.
business is Buffer, huge fan of Buffer, or Agora Pulse,
Yeah.
have something like AP Dustin, and use that as your social handle to build that, to show that it's a great company. There's nothing to lose there. I don't think.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's refreshing to hear, because a lot of corporations think that if their employees put themselves out there like this, that they're going to get poached and someone's going to try to
Right.
recruit them, and then they're going to, have to fill a new role. But I think you have to build your people and invest in your people and always want what's best for them. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad workplace culture.
Right.
So,
And you have to trust too. If an employee is willing to go out on a limb and be that branded employee,
mhm.
building a brand for themselves associated with this company, they're not just going to jump ship easily,
Mhm.
right? Like, because their reputation's on the line too. They're not going to just be this flip flopper brand builder, because their audience wouldn't trust them. So
Mhm.
if they're building their brand smartly, they're going to stick with the brand that they're representing as
Mhm.
much as they can. So just keep them happy, make
Yeah.
make them happy, value them, and they'll in turn spread that value and share that value out to give you a greater reach with their
Yeah.
audience.
Make them proud to work with you and to be with you, and not
Yeah,
have these wandering eyes to go somewhere else where they'll feel valued.
yeah, absolutely. It's almost similar to an affiliate.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they're an affiliate of your brand. So one of my companies is a WordPress plugin called Social Warfare. We created the product because we hated all the social sharing plugins out there. We wanted people to share our content in a really optimized way, so we created the product. But I would say beyond anything else, one of the things that we did right from the beginning was we created an affiliate program. People who were incentivized to share our product with other people. And if you value those people, you give them the tools they need to spread the word, spread the good word about your product. That's only going to help you in the long run. So treating an employee advocate like an affiliate, just understand that they're going to do the marketing for you in a way that you cannot do yourself. Like I can't write a review for Social Warfare because people go, well, he owns it. But somebody who works for you saying like, this is such a great company to work for, you can't tell people with that same authority that you're a great place to work.
Right.
But saying that has so much more weight.
Yeah, it's that social proof. It's like the holy grail. If you could have your employees and your customers do your marketing for you, you're in great shape.
Yeah.
And I always joke, as marketers, it makes our job easier because we have all these people advocating. You don't even have to think of a creative idea some days because you just have these amazing testimonials that you can amplify.
Content's created for you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So let's I think end this on The Rock, because if you were to read up on it, I think Forbes named him the highest paid actor in the world 2 years in a row. So
wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, he's the highest paid actor right now. And just to think that he started off as a wrestler. I think I think he played football at the University of Miami.
He did, I believe so, yeah. He was a Brahma Bull. That's why they called him the Brahma Bull. That was one of his nicknames.
So humble beginnings. So how would you really wrap up everything we can learn and take away from The Rock, and how his early decisions and branding himself cemented his success and turned him into this, hugely successful actor?
I would say first and foremost, be consistent in who you are, at your core, what you believe in, what you fight for, what you're willing to be passionate about. Be consistent on that and be vocal about it. But also don't be afraid to try new things or to branch out a little bit and maybe risk being a little bit too one direction or another. Because when Rock really locked in and he said, I'm going to try this thing and go with this story arc, he realized it hit. And when you find that thing that hits, when you find that thing that your audience connects to, feed into that thing and give more of it, and find different ways to give more of it. I think that's one of the greatest lessons of Dwayne's career is just because you start and it's not taken off doesn't mean you can't try new things, but be consistent and find what works and go with it, and pay attention to your audience. Because there's something to be said about how well a wrestler and somebody who is, in my opinion, unmatched with his microphone skills, Dwayne Johnson. He can get that microphone and he's the star. But it's not just that he's good at talking. He's really good at listening. Anybody who's done performance in any way, stand-up comedians especially, they know that it's just as important to be listening to the audience while you're talking as it is to what you're actually saying. You have to pay attention to your audience and see how they're responding, and just follow that. Follow where they're responding. It'll take you to great places.
Yeah, well said. And I think there's a big lesson there, because he didn't just pigeonhole himself as a wrestler. He was always dreaming bigger. He went into acting, which was probably a little weird for him at first, or weird for the public to say, like, what's this wrestling guy doing in a movie? But look at him now. And, he has a tequila brand now. And I think of how J-Lo is similar. I mean, she started off as an actress, a dancer, really. But
she's a dancer, background dancer.
Yeah, she dreamt for more, and now she's doing the Super Bowl, and she's on top of the world. So I think there's a lesson that you can always dream bigger. And you want to have a niche, but think about how you can take it to the next level and be present in more places and really do what you want to do. So awesome. I appreciate that so much. Where can people follow you? What can you plug? Tell us, where can we read your blog? All of that fun stuff.
Head over to simplest thing. I'm all over the place. But if you go to dustinstout.com, you'll find all the things there.
Awesome. And I'll have it all linked in the description and everything. Again, thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate you
you.
hopping on and geeking out over marketing and WrestleMania. This was a ton of fun. So thank you, Dustin.
Great time. So happy to be here.
If you're a fan of this podcast, be sure to subscribe, or better yet, leave a review. You can also join my Twitter chat at #PopChat for weekly pop culture discussions you can actually learn from. If you have an idea for an episode, shoot me a DM at Brianne2K. As always, thanks for listening.